When I was little, learning to read was really hard for me. I wanted to just know how to read instead of taking the time to learn how to do it. But despite my frustration, my mom continued to work with me, and soon I could read very well, but I hated doing it. Eventually, as I got older, through the influence of my sister, I became an avid reader and have been ever since. During my preschool years, my mom would read to my sister and I all the time. The books I remember reading over and over included Guess How Much I Love You, Is Your Mama a Llama, and my personal favorite, Time for Bed.
When Courtney started to read, we worked from a book called Teaching Your Child to Read and 100 Easy Lessons. It was a really fun book that gave the children a lot of credit for their learning skills. And as they went through each lesson, they not only learned grammar and spelling, but reading skills as well. Courtney's biggest problem was that she had an older sister who could read, and Courtney just felt that reading was some magical thing that you looked at the words and you knew them. So whenever she would go through a lesson, she would get very frustrated because she didn't want to do the exercises the lesson suggested. She wanted to just say the words or say the sentences or read the sentences. However, obviously she didn't know what the sentences said because she hadn't learned how to read at that point yet. So it took a lot of persuasion and a lot of practicing to get through each lesson because she wanted to just know the answers. Eventually she figured out that she had to learn how to sound out the words and then connect the words to make the sentences. After she figured that out and we had a lot more practice, she did fabulous and learned how to read.
During elementary school, because I was homeschooled, my mom, sister, and I would go to the library and spend the afternoon there at least once a week, though I would usually end up coming home with a stuffed animal rather than a book. My mom continued to try to encourage my reading, but my sister was definitely the reader of the family. In middle school, at the prompting of my mom and my sister, I began to read my first series, The Little House books by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I fell in love with them and wouldn't put them down. Once I finished with those, because I was into horses, I borrowed one of my sister's thoroughbred books, the first in a series of about 65, and started collecting them. When I couldn't get a new one fast enough, I borrowed one of my sister's Nancy Drew books and moved on to mysteries. When I began to read Trixie Belden, I was hooked. I wanted to read, and no one could stop me.
When my sister Courtney and I were little, there's no question that I was definitely the reader of the family. I was able to read from a really, really young age, and actually later on in life developed eye problems because I read so much. I had to get glasses because my eyes didn't develop correctly. But no matter how hard I tried, I could never seem to get her really interested and exciting about reading like I was. She was just never as into it. And I always tried to get her to read. I would show her like, oh, I'm reading this book about horses and it's really, really cool. Or I'm reading this book about plants or bugs or anything else, whatever she was interested in at the time. And she just never really had the same connection. But then it was really interesting because as she started to get older, I think she developed more of a skill for reading. And then all these books became really, really fascinating to her. And then the fact that I already read a lot of them, we could talk about them together. I know one of the series we read was like the Thoroughbred series, and it was about horses. And we both really, really liked horses. So then that was something that we could talk about together. And eventually she ended up reading all types of different books, not just books that were specifically about her interest, as she became better and better at reading. I'm really proud that she was able to get that level of skill with reading because it's a super important skill in life. For me personally, I found that it's been one of the greatest skills that I've acquired. I was able to get scholarships to college that were bigger because of my ability to read and also my ability to write. In my classes in high school and in college, it's been so wonderful to be able to have a reading skill because when you have to read 60, 90 pages a day from textbooks and it's hard and you need to be able to process it quick, remember it, and the fact that I read so much when I was little really helped me to be able to do that. And now I actually have an internship writing for a newspaper, and it's the same thing. If you can't get through and edit your papers fast, edit your stories fast, be able to catch your problems, you would never be able to make it. And I'm only able to do that because I can read.
During my first couple years in high school, I stuck with pretty simple to read books, like the Heartland series and the Phantom Stallion series. because I still wasn't a very confident reader, and broadening my horizons from there was kind of scary. Then one of my friends introduced me to a romance novel, and I fell in love with absolutely everything Diana Palmer and Nora Roberts. Then, a lady that I babysit for gave me the first book of the Mortal Instruments series, and I got my first taste of real fantasy, and absolutely loved that as well. Then I read the Twilight series, even though I was kind of skeptical at first, and was pretty much willing to read anything after that. So that's my story. I went from being a little kid who had lots of struggles learning to read, to an avid reader who has found she enjoys just about every genre. Any book I'm handed, I'm willing to give a shot, and I definitely never stop looking for things to read. Once you discover the world a book can take you to, not much can compare. Keep reading.